Welcome, everyone, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hayden Lee, and I'm joined this week by, I don't know if I should say you're my favorite brother-in-law or my least favorite brother-in-law. I don't know what would be more offensive to everyone else.
I know, right? I do know that our dogs are best friends, and our wives are best friends.
Yeah, so maybe I might put you towards the top. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that.
Lon
we
Kreger.
do have some good brother-in-laws.
Lon Kreger, Chief Commercial Officer for Maggertech.
Yeah, it's cool.
Did I hit all of the points there?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Lon. Appreciate it.
Really appreciate the time to be here, man.
I hope the podcast, for the few people that might be listening, I hope it doesn't turn too much into Hayden and his family show. But I feel like I have really cool family members that are in some cool industries and doing some cool things. And yeah, I'm excited to have you on. So.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm a pretty regular guy, so we'll see. We'll see how this turns out. I don't know how interesting my story is, but we'll see.
It's more interesting than you give yourself credit. So.
Well, okay. I guess we'll see.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about who you are, Lon, and how you kind of got started in the ag industry.
Yeah.
You grew up in a place that I think is unique. I haven't visited your hometown, but I know roughly enough about it to know that it's kind of a mixture of ag as well as like a pretty high population area as well. And so I think maybe, I don't know if that influenced you to get into ag. I don't know if you want to go back that far, but I think let's talk a little bit about who you are and how you got this start in the ag space.
Yeah, so I'm from Fort Collins, Colorado, for everybody, home of Colorado State University. They were once upon a time one of the biggest ag schools in the country. And so while we grew up around it, I did not come from ag, which is pretty unique. And I think for maybe some of our younger viewers, the folks that are trying to figure out what path to take in life, I would just say keep your doors open because you never really know. How I got into agriculture, I guess, was in my early years, I guess I knew I wanted to be in the core industries, mining, petroleum, agriculture, something that was so elemental it would be, almost recession proof, but at the same time would have offered me opportunities for wealth creation, and how do you actually set your family up so you can provide for them in a way that they actually deserve. I've always been drawn to those core industries. My wife's maiden name is Farmer, and so
mine as well.
So I literally married the farmer's daughter.
Yes,
and you're welcome to steal that joke if you'd like.
I haven't used it yet. I haven't quite hit full dad joke mode. So you've been there 3 times over.
It's always gets a good chuckle. So I married the farmer's daughter, and I just kind of got into the family business after that. And I started my career with Bayer Crop Science, which is kind of one of the big 3, is kind of the way that it was spoken about at the time. And just started at the very bottom and was just a grunt running around trying to get as much exposure as possible in those early years. Again, I didn't grow up on a farm, so I was at a major disadvantage to all my peers. So I knew I had to work harder. I knew I had to run faster. And my first couple of years working for Bayer, I was a part of a couple of really cool technology launches. One of them was called LibertyLink soybeans, which is a GMO type of an herbicide-resistant crop. And it required a lot of time in Nebraska, in Iowa, in South Dakota. And so I spent the early years of my career really running around cornfields. And that's kind of when I got my bachelor's degree in agronomy. I had some amazing mentors at that time who, taught me a lot to better understand the industry. And then from there, I've just kind of grown. So
that's really cool. You got kind of your boots on the ground bachelor's in agronomy, but what is your actual degree, your undergrad degree in?
Yeah, so my undergrad is actually in marketing with minors in economics and mathematics.
Which is, the reason I ask that, and I wanted listeners to kind of emphasize on that, is similar to my story in that we didn't get degrees in what we currently do for a living. You know what I mean?
To a point, yeah.
To a point, yeah. I think you've grown into a position where a lot of what you do for an ag company ends up being marketing.
Yeah.
But I find that interesting that I think you developed. What's cool about getting a degree, and this is kind of my long spiel about getting educated, is it helps you develop the soft skills in order to be successful in any field. That's my opinion on education. I think there's a lot of problems in education, and education is attacked by everybody. I attack it at times, and everybody does it.
Sure.
There are major issues with it. But I think if you look at it from a fact of, is this helping me develop soft skills and to be a better person? And if it helps you do that, that's, in my opinion, a successful education. And so, you didn't get a degree necessarily in ag science or, an animal science or agronomy, like per se, like the paper, but you got some soft skills that help you in your career in the long term.
Yeah, and it's actually funny that you call them soft skills versus hard skills.
Yeah.
That's actually been something that drove me to actually get my graduate work. Is I wanted more hard skills. So it's an interesting word choice that you use there, because I think we agree. When I was a sophomore in high school, I went into my guidance counselor, and they had all of these questions for me about what type of career I wanted to do, and it was really difficult for me to. I was never the kid that was like, I'm going to be a heart surgeon. I'm going to be a dentist. I was always like, I'm going to be a garbage man. So for me, it was always a little bit difficult to try and find what my right path was. And I remember having this conversation with this counselor who was supposed to be my oracle, right?
Yeah.
And she said, well, what's your favorite class? And I said, I love history, man. I love it. And she goes, well, go get a history degree. And I'm like, and then do what?
Yeah.
And she goes,
teach history?
Yeah. And that was exactly that. And so I said, I don't think I want to teach history. I want more out of life. I want to, and nothing that there's nothing wrong with history. I felt like there was something else, something more that I needed to do. So it's interesting that you say that, because I had this experience where she said, well, just get the degree, and then after that you can go do whatever you want. And I didn't understand that. And quite frankly, for the 3 years after that, and then as you know, but the folks at home might not, is I was a missionary for 2 years in Argentina. So from that point until when I got back and started my college career in earnest, was almost 5 years. Yeah. And I had 5 years of frustration where I had this comment that was made to me that, well, just get a piece of paper and everything will work out. Yeah. And I honestly think that that's one of the issues that our education system has is just on that side of, hey, just get a piece of paper and everything will be fine. I think that there's a lot of ways to gain an education, and they don't necessarily have to come from an academic institution, but that there's a lot of other really cool places to go with it.
100%. So. That's cool. I wanted to kind of hit at that a little bit, because I just come to the realization just the other day, actually, that we don't necessarily have degrees in the things that we, in the industries that we are in, which is fascinating to me, and I think speaks to a lot to who you are, like the skills that you were able to develop and that you were successful in. In my opinion, I think you could be successful in any industry because of your education but the soft skills that you were able to develop. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. But so you worked at Bayer for you said 3 years.
So I did about 2 years in RTP in North Carolina. And then we did a couple of years, about 2.5 years, 3 years with Bayer in Ohio, North Central Ohio.
Very cool.
So
what was the shift? And this is kind of more of a personal conversation, because we're eventually going to get into the startup, Maggertech, where you're at currently. Yeah. But I want to highlight some things for you as a personal individual growing your career. Sure. What were some steps that you felt like you had to achieve to get to where you wanted to go? Because like you said at the beginning, you wanted to set your family up in a way that you could make a really good living and support your kids and your wife. Like, were there certain goals that you had? Like, I want to be the CEO of a company by this time. Like, what were your goals that you wanted to achieve, I guess?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest goals I've always had is how do I magnify whatever gifts and talents, the good Lord's given me, really,
Yeah.
And I've run into that quite a bit throughout my career. Somebody will ask the question, well, how did you develop this market, right? Or how did you sell so much? In my early career, that's kind of where I started, was in sales, and people were like, well, how did you get so much incremental growth? And I can map out some of the tactics that I used.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's almost like asking Usain Bolt how he runs fast, right? Like he practices a lot.
Yep.
And I practice my emotional intelligence a lot. But at the end of the day, I do believe that there's some God-given talent that you have to feed into.
Yeah.
And not everybody should be a CEO.
Yeah.
Not everybody should be a CFO.
Yeah.
I should not be an accountant, right? Like I don't have that level of precision and monotony. I kind of joke with our current CFO. His name's Mel. A really good friend of mine. He's phenomenal, and that he's kind of a sadist. That he's just a glutton.
He
for
enjoys
punishment.
just crunching numbers, man.
That's it.
Yeah.
So, we always think that our goal has to be the guy leading the charge.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately, and I think maybe what this newer generation is really good at is recognizing that they don't have to lead the charge in order to have a fulfilled life.
That's cool.
So, for me, I knew that one of my gifts is to be able to impact an organization. And, being able to come in and influence culture in a positive way has always been one of my key characteristics. And during the interview processes, I talk about it, and, I'll outline, this is how I've influenced culture. And I do believe that team unity, getting everybody rowing in the same direction, is critical for success. And I do believe that you see, for lack of, I hate using buzzwords, but synergistic effects when everybody loves to work where they work.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about your company,
Yeah.
And some of the culture that Michael Johnson's helped to create and things like that you guys got a good culture here.
100%.
I used your restrooms and you even have like gum and mint in the restroom. I'm like, this place is swanky.
This place is, listen, man, we got a soda machine and we got gum in the bathroom.
Awesome.
It's pretty
awesome.
sweet.
Yeah.
You hit a couple things there, and I think I asked a poor question, and I want to ask a better one.
Okay, hit me. Not literally, because you got hands.
I could do that. How did you recognize those qualities within yourself that you knew you wanted to impact the culture of a company? How did you recognize that within yourself? Because I think a lot of people they're like, I want to make X amount of dollars by this time. Mm-hmm. I want to be the CEO of a company. I want to do this, blah, 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 blah. But they don't necessarily know how to get there. And I think everybody's journey is different. So, we could have you sit here and explain, I got this job at this time and worked for 2 years. Then I got this job and then that. But I think more importantly, how did you recognize that desire within yourself? How did you recognize that skill within? Was there something? Was there an event? Was there, you know what I mean? Like how did you recognize that within yourself?
Yeah, man, that's a really good question, and I don't know if I had. I don't know if I had like a seminal moment.
Okay.
I think it was probably just a natural progression.
Yeah.
Look, I think
which is a great answer. I'm not saying there has to be a seminal moment, but
I do believe that there are there's moments that I can look back on. I had a teacher that accidentally sent me their performance review of me as a student. And in it, he said, Lon is the most gifted and natural leader I've ever been around. And then he criticized me. But he kind of started it that way.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to send that to you. But that was probably because, I was young. I was 19 when that happened. And I had to think to myself, am I really a leader? Like, what does that even mean? But here was somebody that I really respected, kind of saying, hey, he has some natural ability in this regard. So that probably shaped it, you know. And I think we've talked about it. I've written a book on becoming the expert, and one of the key elements in becoming an expert is getting somebody to recognize you as it. You have to have somebody publicly recognize you as the expert. And because of that, I kind of had this moment where I said, oh, maybe I do have some natural leadership qualities. The other thing too, I think in our society we have a couple of faux pas. And one of them is talking about our desire to earn money. And the other one is our desire to be in a position of influence or a position of power. And I think culturally we're oftentimes shy of that. And we're uncomfortable talking about it. And quite frankly, a lot of times I am. But just because culturally that's kind of what's bred into you.
Right.
Know, be humble, stay humble. But if I think that if you have a natural ability to have a vision of the future and you have the ability to pull people together and get them moving in the same direction, I believe you have an obligation to do so. In the same way that if you have an incredible mathematical mind and you can advance physics, you have an obligation to mankind to advance physics. And so if your ability is to lead people in a business to help people make a good living so that they can support their families in a noble way, then you have an obligation to do that. And that comes from good fiscal policies. It comes from creative business management, and it comes from, identifying different creative business solutions. So for me, I do have goals to continue to move up. I'm the chief commercial officer currently. Someday I do plan on being a, chief executive officer. And whatever that means. There's a lot of different iterations of that, but
that's awesome. You hit some really, like you have a duty to magnify those skills.
I believe so.
And it's fascinating that you're able to recognize those within yourself. I'm gonna try and get religious without making it weird for maybe those listeners that aren't, but there's a concept that has been spoken about that I've heard, and it's in a religious setting, but I think it applies to anybody, whether you're religious or not.
Yeah.
And it's the idea of how it's called patterns of light. And it was talked about by a very well-respected person within the LDS Church named David A. Bednar.
Yep.
And he talks about how one of the patterns of light that he talks about, and I think this applies to anybody, again, religious or not. One of the patterns of light is he gives the analogy of a foggy day, right? And how on a foggy day, a really, really super foggy day, which we don't get a lot of those in Idaho, but in other places, you can see just enough to walk forward just a few steps. Mm-hmm. And when you walk forward a few steps, you can see the next few steps. And when you walk forward another few steps, you can see the next few steps. And you can kind of keep going, keep going, keep going. And eventually, when the fog is lifted, you can look back on your career and see, or not career, but in the analogy, you can look back and see how far you've traveled. Yeah. And I think that's applicable to your situation. Yeah. I think you said there was probably a couple seminal moments when you were like, hey, this clicked for me and I'm going to be a leader. But the rest of your career, I think you can just look back and see, hey, I was a leader in this situation, and I was a leader in this situation, and I helped this company grow or this division grow at this spot. And I think people can apply that to their personal, their professional lives, whatever they might want to do. If all you can see is a couple steps ahead of you, take those couple steps, and then you're going to see a couple more, and then you're going to see a couple more. And I found that's true in my life. I found that's true in the lives of people around me, that we're not always going to have everything laid out on a silver platter. We're not always going to have like this perfect game plan. Okay, I want to be CEO.
Has that ever happened?
I don't think that's ever
happened to me.
Yeah, 100%, dude.
I have heard stories, but where somebody's like, he drives up and like, hey, you like my Lamborghini? Here's the keys.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare.
That happens in YouTube videos. I don't think that happens in real life.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like nobody's going to, as much as I would love to be like, okay, I want to be a CEO in 5 years. Here's the checklist that I have to do. I'm going to do this by this time, this by this time, and then boom, I'm CEO. Mm-hmm. Life typically doesn't work that way. And so I think you have to be willing to see a little bit ahead of you, take some steps, see a little bit more ahead of you, take some more steps.
So I actually love where you're going, by the way. So I got 2 comments on that if I can jump
in. Go ahead.
So first off, my faith is really important to me.
Yeah.
And I've kind of said in the past and say it here, my missionary service was a seminal moment for absolutely everything I do. It has impacted and influenced every step I've taken thereafter. And when I look at the fog of life and not knowing where I should go, I do believe that, when the Lord opens a door, you should step through it. It provides a world of opportunity for you. That doesn't mean that you need to answer every door every time the doorbell goes off. But what it means is, you should contemplate honestly and seriously every opportunity that comes across your path and decide if it's the right one, even if it alters your planned tragectory. Ronald A. Rasband, for example, who was the former president of Huntsman Corp., agricultural and chemical manufacturer in Utah. He has a really interesting story where he was actually kind of tapped on the shoulder by the original Huntsman, by John Huntsman, who was a great philanthropist and everything else with the Huntsman Cancer Institute and everything else, where he was a member of his early married congregation there in Salt Lake City. And he said, hey, Ronald, I need a guy in Cincinnati, Ohio, I think is what it was. And he said, cool, I graduate in a year and a half. And John said, no, Ron, I need somebody now. And so he chose not to finish his school, right? Even though that was the plan, is to finish going to the University of Utah. And he didn't. He decided to kind of follow that path, and he continued to climb the ladder until he became president of one of the largest privately held chemical manufacturers in the country. I think just second to the Koch brothers.
Wow.
So, and it's since gone public and other things like that, I believe. But to that point, sometimes we have to be willing to take an off ramp to follow the right path. However, I am an analytics guy. That's what I do have my graduate work in, is analytics, and that's because I believe that's part of the future, not only of agriculture, but of a lot of places where we're going. And so as we talked about hard skills and soft skills earlier. For me, one of the hard skills that I wanted to pursue was this analytics. Not because I needed to be the guy crunching the numbers. I knew that was never going to be me. We kind of talked about not being a CFO, that's not me. But what I needed to do was be able to talk intelligently when somebody brought me data. I needed to be able to ask for the right type of information in order to make successful outcomes and decisions to successfully lead and guide organizations. And so as I looked at what that meant, getting a master's in analytics became really important for me. And so what I continued to pursue was kind of this understanding from a graduate work standpoint. Forbes actually has a really great article, if you guys get a chance to look at it, that talks about the steps to become a CEO. And they talk about getting undergrad in engineering, go on, work in industry for a little bit. And it doesn't matter where you get your degree from, basically is what they said. Get it as economically as you can in your undergrad.
That's cool.
But get a degree in engineering, then work for a couple of years, go get an MBA. From the bigger the school, the better. If you can get into Harvard, go to Harvard. And then go work for McKinsey, one of the largest, consulting firms out there. Work for a major consulting firm for a couple of years, and that gives you your highest chance of becoming a CEO.
Wow.
So
that's cool.
There's actually there's a data point out there that 1 in 600 McKinsey consultants become the CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
Wow. That's fascinating.
So if you look at the analytics, there is a roadmap if you want to follow it. And so if you get a chance, check out that article. And there's different things. There's different stage gates that you can go through, right? And becoming an engineering student, for example, gives you like a 39% chance.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So it's kind of
That's what I was planning on.
That's right.
I was
You
just
gotta
really,
just run the show.
Yeah, I'm gonna share that article with my bosses.
That's right. Hey, do you guys know how smart I am?
You know that I'm destined to be the CEO. No, that's cool. That's really, really fascinating. You hit at your MBA. We've hit at a couple places that you've worked with Bear. I want, at the risk of this becoming a religion podcast, I want to shift more into talking about MagrowTec.
Okay.
And what you're doing now, and the step that kind of led you to working for an ag startup.
Yeah, sure.
A few weeks ago, we had a guy on the podcast named Clint Weston, and he works for a startup in Utah.
It was a great podcast.
Awesome.
Highly recommend going back. Link is in the description below.
Yes, Clint was awesome.
Yeah.
He reached out through LinkedIn. It's one of the really cool things about social media I've found is specifically with LinkedIn that I've been able to connect with some really, really cool people.
For sure. It's a great platform.
So I'm fascinated with startups, and I don't know why. I can't explain to you why. So I'm fascinated with what you do. I have a hard time explaining it to other people, and what MagrowTec does. So I would love to hear from the CCO.
Yeah.
What MagrowTec is and what do you guys do?
Sure. Yeah, MaggerTech's a really fascinating and exciting company, and the heart of that company is some really innovative technology. Let me step back a little bit to talk about technology in the ag space, because a lot of times we say
big picture. Yep.
And really what you talk about is, we think of Silicon Valley, right? And Facebook and Apple and all of those different things. Maybe if you get a little bit more sophisticated about technology, you start talking about biotech, right?
Yeah.
And you start talking about, Elon Musk and these brain implants and different things like that, right? And we start talking about all of these really, really high-end crazy stuff. We talk about self-driving cars. Well, guess what? Agriculture's had self-driving tractors for 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Agriculture has had genetically modified crops for 40 years, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about cutting edge tech, whether it's biologically related, whether it is like actually hardware, like electronically, those sorts of things, the use of social media and things like that. Oftentimes we think of a farmer, some backwoods hick that is can barely read or write, doesn't get on the internet. The truth could not be it could not be further from that reality. Part of my role has always been to help people understand and respect the farmer more than what they do today. The fact that they grow the food that we can so easily go to the grocery store and purchase off the shelves is a miracle. These people should be honored for the hard labors that they invest in. Now it's their profession; they make money growing corn, but at the end of the day, they put their livelihoods, their families' livelihoods on the line literally every year. And so when we talk about technology, I remember when I was with Bear, so this was a decade ago, whatever, we did a study about how often American farmers were using things like the internet and were using Facebook or some of these other, or Twitter. And pretty consistently, they were at 2 or 3x the national average.
Wow.
So these backwood hicks growing all your corn that don't know nothing, guess what? A decade and a half ago, they were on Twitter twice as much as the average American, right? They were on the internet twice as much.
And probably not like sending tweets to their favorite celebrity.
Probably not, right?
Probably using it for maybe like a good purpose.
Yeah, right? I mean, so it's actually pretty fascinating when you look at it from that. So when I talk about technology in the ag space, so let me tell you about Maggertech, right? Okay. Maggertech's phenomenal. So there is a new wave in fluid conditioning using magnetic fields. And it is everything from, there was a recent study published about conditioning the water using magnetic fields before it went into a concrete mixing plant, okay? And they were actually able to lower the amount of cement in that concrete batch by 5% and maintain the same compression ratio. Well, that doesn't seem like very much. but when you think about carbon footprint, the reality is concrete is a major emitter of carbon in today's world. And cement is the big portion of that. Oftentimes we use cement and concrete interchangeably, but think of cement as the active ingredient in concrete. Right? So the cement portion of it, if you can reduce that by 5%, you're reducing a massive amount of carbon.
Yeah, you're reducing your carbon footprint by 5%, and then when you divide that up across the whole industry,
it's incredible.
It's an incredible amount.
It's an incredible opportunity, and all you're doing is running it past a series of magnets. Right?
Running the water past a series of
right?
You're not changing.
You're not changing anything else.
Yeah.
And there's some really fascinating science behind molecular alignment and different things like that. The University of Idaho actually just released a study about 2 weeks ago where they did it agriculturally, running irrigation water through it, where they're actually showing increased depth of moisture retention.
That's cool.
So even if you're not in ag, you can understand that it's important for the root zone to be able to maintain a highly moisturized content, a high moisture content in that soil. And so again, University of Idaho just released a study on it. So there's a lot of fascinating pieces. So what we do is we use a series of manifolds and rods inside of the booms. So our product is called a boom kit, and it's installed. It can be retrofitted on virtually any sprayer in the world today. And the solution in the tank runs through the manifolds like a radiator, and it gets conditioned so that when it leaves the nozzles, we're actually increasing deposition and we're decreasing drift. And so when you talk about being a responsible, sustainable grower, there's huge pressure for these farmers to make sure that the product that they're spraying goes where it's supposed to go from a legal standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
But additionally, right now, we have commodity prices that are soaring. So Roundup, for example, which is one of the most commonly used herbicides in the world, traditionally you could buy generic Roundup for $12 to maybe $20 a gallon pretty easily. This year we've seen it over $60. I saw one guy selling it for $80. I don't know how often that was, but $60 a gallon was a common point. So for these growers to be able to get every penny out of their inputs is really important. And in traditional chemistry, traditional spraying methods, only about 30 to 50% of that solution that you're paying a lot of money for is actually ending up on the crop. The rest of it is either atomizing into the atmosphere or it's landing on the soil and running off and stuff. So we feel like we offer a really unique position for the grower where they're able to get the most bang for their buck. They're able to be sustainable environmentally as well as economically. So
it's the tech behind it fascinates me in my nerdy engineer brain.
Sure.
Because it just sounds so cool that all you've got to do with some magnets and I mean there's more complicated science behind it.
There is,
but it's just fascinating, man.
I should have brought my textbook because people always say, well, how does it work? So I actually have a textbook. It's literally a textbook.
That's awesome.
And the gentleman who wrote it is out of UCD, University College Dublin in Ireland, who is one of the foremost experts in magnetic conditioning of fluids. And again, this is a brand new science. And the formulas for this stuff is a textbook, right? Because there's so much intricacy. You have different heavy metals, calcium, irons, aluminums, all sorts of stuff in your water. And every water source has a different water complexity. And so everything is going to affect that solution. What you're mixing into it, are you mixing in an herbicide? Are you mixing in an adjuvant? There's so many different variables that the science is so complex.
The whole science behind it is really cool, and I think what you guys are offering to farmers to help them get more out of that $60 a gallon that they got to pay for a product in order to help crops grow is, it's huge. It's hugely advantageous. Yeah. Farmers, the margins on a farmer's product are razor thin as it is.
Yeah.
So if you could do anything to help alleviate that in some way.
Most farmers make money 1 year in 5.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And that's in the U.S., where we're really good at farming.
Yeah.
So if you think about farmers globally, which I've been blessed to be a part of a lot of international initiatives, guys don't make money. I mean, they're subsistence farming in a lot of cases. So.
Yeah. So you being brought in from Maggertech, like you mentioned, you're not necessarily, you didn't invent this system that helps with that. So they're bringing you in as a CCO to help grow their company. Yeah. What's kind of been your main focus and goal as a CCO with Maggertech?
Sure. When you look at, I guess, my track record, there's a few things that I focus on to be really successful in a business. And I think that this is applicable to any stage of business. And that the first one is access to market. So who is your partners? And you guys do a great job with accessing the market.
100%.
Your business is in the world of just creating access. And so for me and my business, whether it's in Brazil where you're navigating, complex regulatory environments and you have, a landscape that has a whole bunch of competition and players that maybe aren't playing by the rules specifically. There's always a temptation to kind of go off the books or something like that.
Right.
But I do believe that integrity and making sure that you're always doing things the right way ultimately leads you to your long-term success. And so I think, so when you look at some of those key pillars, it's number one, find your access points. So your partners that you can trust to do things and build your business the right way. And then number two, you need to identify the end consumer. So who's actually using your market, your product, and how are they using it? Because that's the other component is a lot of times people use your product in ways that you never intended them to use it that way.
100%.
And you don't necessarily have the ability to control that, but you hope that you can capitalize off of it, right?
Well, and being in tune enough with the market to be able to recognize that, okay, they're using our customers are using our product a different way. Let's shift how we either market this, or let's shift on how we're going to help people. And I think you guys do that in a way. We've had discussions about what you do at work, shifting your business model to a HaaS model. I think is a one way that you have noticed a need in the market with your product. Let's shift how we do that. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I guess first, HaaS stands for hardware as a service. I think a lot of people are familiar with SaaS, software as a service.
Yep.
I like to use a cell phone as an analogy because it works for both. You have an AT&T cell phone plan, and that's SaaS, right? That's your software as a service where you're basically,
or your home internet or whatever it is.
Exactly. But with your phone, you also have the phone itself, your Apple iPhone or your Google Pixel or whatever, and that hardware you never own, right? And it actually really bothered me at first because I went into AT&T. I'm like, no.
Can I just
my
buy
$1,000?
Yeah.
Let me. And they're like, you can't. And I'm like, no. I want. It says the price. They're like, yeah, we won't sell it to you. And I'm like, dude, what? So it was really frustrating. And the hope for a company that creates a subscription model is it's actually for the customer's benefit as well as for the company's benefit.
Yeah.
So I think that this might be something that's really interesting for the listeners. So kind of the motivation behind creating a subscription model. So on one hand, the company wants to lower the price, lower the barrier.
The barrier of entry. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, because if you walk in and you say, oh man, I broke my phone, and they say, great, give me $1,500 so you can replace it. Most of us are like, I don't have $1,500 of
like liquid
extra,
cash,
laying around, right?
Yeah.
That takes a chunk out.
Yep.
And so they say, okay, well, how do we make that work with the net present value of cash? So NPC. So you're saying, my dollar today is worth more than $1 tomorrow, right? That principle. And so the company has to kind of expand it so that they say, okay, well, how long do we have to essentially finance this, but also make money?
Right.
And so the company's trying to do that. But on the other hand, the company wants a long-term customer.
Right.
And so this is what becomes really sexy, is that when you can lock in your revenue, when you know exactly what your revenue is based on your subscriber count, all of a sudden, to an investor, your $1 million of revenue is represented very differently in a valuation standpoint.
Totally.
So from a CapEx, so a capital expense purchase, so if you pay $1,500 for your iPhone, usually you have, well, the markets today have been really weird, but typically in a merger and acquisition standpoint, you're looking anywhere from a 2.5 to a 4x valuation on your EBITDA, your earnings before interest, taxes, and blah blah blah, right?
Right.
So
your revenue is $1 million for that year.
you can probably sell your business for 3.
Yeah.
Right. Type of a deal.
There you go.
Okay. That's not including your fixtures and your real estate and everything
Yep.
else, right? Things today have been crazy, and every industry is a little bit different, and sometimes those get 7, 8x, whatever else. But I'm talking normal world.
Yeah.
If your subscription model, say you do $1 million in subscriptions this year, you can 10x that.
That's so cool.
So now your business is worth $10 million instead of $3 million.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. And that's great for you as the business that you're creating. And do you remember what I said before? You have an obligation
Yep.
to be able to create value in a company so that you can have employees who can feed their families honorably.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So if you have the ability to create a business that is fluid in cash, that has the wherewithal to continue to innovate, you're going to be able to support a lot of families, and that's noble. That's a good thing. And so what we looked at was, number one, because any technology, when it first comes out, is really expensive.
Yep.
Right.
It is. Yep.
I remember my dad was so excited when high definition TVs came out, and my dad's one of the smartest people you ever meet.
Yeah.
He's an electrical engineer. He's worked on some really cool stuff. He did the first touchscreen back in the 80s.
That's cool.
Which is crazy. He helped on the emotion chip for the Sony PlayStation. He did the wireless Wi-Fi, or excuse me, wireless USB. So the fact that your mouse and keyboard work, my dad
Right.
was on that. So he's done some really cool stuff. Super smart guy. Well, the year 2000 comes out and they have this brand new HD TV, and he was so excited that he went out and paid like $10,000 for a TV, right? My mom drove my mom nuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
because now an HD TV is you can go
$1,200,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it was like a 40-inch. I mean, it wasn't
Yeah.
like this. It wasn't like a 90.
Oh, a 40-inch HD TV right now is like $200.
Yeah, right. That's
yeah.
my point. Right?
Yeah.
And again, this was like 420i or whatever,
Yeah.
right? I don't even know. But he was like, I knew this was coming since the 1970s. So like theoretically, they knew how to make an HD TV back in the 70s.
Right.
But the processing, the operational know-how, all that stuff, it took 25 years, 30 years. So that
Right.
part was really cool. So technology is really expensive when it comes out, and that's no exception for Maggertech. We understand that it's an expensive product. It costs about $40,000 per unit, but at the same time, we have a really strong ROI. Most farmers make their money back in a single season using the product, and where the product will essentially last, the length or the lifetime of your sprayer. That's a really good,
That's an awesome ROI.
Yeah. So 10 years plus, you're making good money. If you tell a grower that, hey, you're going to make an extra 40, you can basically reduce your costs by $40,000 a year
For the next 10 years.
Yep. And look, there's 2 ways to increase your profit. Okay.
Yeah.
You can either increase your revenue or you can decrease your cost, your spending.
Yeah.
And the fascinating part is, in most situations, if you say, hey, I need to make another $100,000 for my business, usually that equates to a 3x in your revenue standpoint. So typically, because of where your profits line up and taxes and everything else. So typically, if you want to make another $100,000 to put in your pocket, you have to sell $300,000 in product.
Right.
In cost, it is 1-to-1.
Right.
So if you want to make $100,000,
cut
$100,000 in cost.
Yeah.
It's quicker and easier.
Yeah.
And that's where our product takes you, is you can immediately cut costs by about 20%. And so that's pretty sweet.
So cool, man. Everything about it and everything about what you're talking about, I think is really cool. And I think it's relatable, maybe not the ag space to some of our listeners, but the whole conversation behind like growing a business and looking for different ways to help your customers get your product.
Yeah.
For the future of Maggertech, are you looking to make more changes like you've done with the Haas model, or what are your kind of your next steps now to help take Maggertech? I don't know if you eventually the goal is to take it public or anything like that, but like what the future of Maggertech, like what are you hoping for?
So from a business structural standpoint, I'm probably limited on how much I can disclose. Right?
Probably.
However, from product iterations, we have some really cool stuff coming,
it's awesome,
right? We have everything where we're exploring nanobubble technology, which should increase the effectiveness of active ingredients and prolong the life cycle of different molecules.
It's awesome.
I know that probably sounds like a lot of jargon, but to an ag guy, to a business guy, that's super exciting. Basically, if a company like Bayer comes up with a brand new herbicide, okay, it probably took them about 12 years to bring it to market. Okay.
Wow.
And that's because they have to identify a new molecule that affects the plant in a new way that would kill it, right? That would kill the lamb's quarter or the dandelion that you're trying to kill.
Right.
And then you have to go through all these processes to make sure it's safe, right?
Yeah.
And that it doesn't do more harm than good and all those things. And so from a technology development standpoint, from a market fit standpoint, it can be really difficult to develop a brand new herbicide or a brand new insecticide.
Yep.
And so with some of our new product iterations, as well as the existing boom kit piece, we can make sure that those molecules last longer. And what I mean by that is, so there's an article earlier this week that we had just identified Roundup resistance in Idaho, and that was the first time it's ever been found this far north into Idaho. But what Roundup resistance means is that there's weeds that Roundup will no longer kill because it's developed immunity essentially to it,
right?
Which is scary.
Yeah.
Australia is plagued by it because of some bad farming practices that they've tried to overcome, and so anything that we can do to increase the effectiveness of known molecules that are safe to use, we want to be able to do that. And there's certain technology components that we're planning on bringing out.
That's cool.
Everything from interconnectivity with the technology, things like optical recognition or AI, different things like that. There's opportunities for us to make sure that we continue to lead the way in spraying practices and being the best, making sure that the grower has the best spray possible.
So cool, man. I want to ask you one kind of final question about, and this is a big picture, more of a big picture question when it comes to startups. I asked Clint this question, and he had a couple really cool answers for it. But why? I mentioned earlier, I am fascinated with startups, and I don't know why I am. I don't know why I think
they're exciting.
And so that's my question. Why am I fascinated with startups, and why do people think they're so cool? Because they're exciting. I mean, that's good. But why are startups and what you guys are doing? You're on the cutting edge. Why is it fascinating to me?
Well, I think it's like, look. So we've talked big draft nerds, right?
Yeah,
because
big time.
We love seeing those new players coming out. People that have worked really hard, being given an opportunity is exciting. And I think that we have that in the startup space. It's kind of draft day, right?
Yeah.
You're kind of out there. There's a couple of unknowns, which makes it a little bit exciting. And there's risk involved.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's potential, right?
Oh yeah.
And watching that next big thing happen it's kind of like knowing the next big band. You know, I'm old enough now that I have no idea who the new people come in.
Yeah.
But I remember like listening to Yellow Card, dating myself now.
Yeah,
I remember
yeah.
listening to like Yellow Card before
Oh, yeah.
anybody knew who they were.
Yeah,
right?
and you're like, these guys are awesome.
Dude, this big tag, you know. So you know, it's one of those things. I think that's why startups are so exciting. It's a really exciting space to be in, to work in, because of the changing landscape.
Yeah.
If you are afraid of challenges, you should not be involved in startups.
And I think that, not to cut you off, but I think that goes for small businesses too.
100%.
And maybe that's why it's fascinating to me, because I'm also fascinated by people that, you know, risk it all to start a small business, which you also own a small business on the side, just to add more to your plate.
Yeah.
So like it's that whole thing to me is just fascinating. And I think that's probably part of the reason. There's some risk involved.
Yeah.
But there's also the potential for a huge reward.
Yeah. And I think, you know, to kind of piggyback on that, and maybe this is another podcast another day, to maybe talk about my experience franchising.
Yeah.
And talk about, you know, starting a franchise and things like that, because you have to buy education. We started out this podcast talking about some of our educational experiences, and you have to have education, full stop.
Yeah.
And education is expensive. And there are certain ways that you can buy your education. Sometimes it's with time and experience, and sometimes it's buying into a franchise system. So you're buying somebody else's experience.
Yeah.
You're buying their product guide and whatever else. So again, we can probably chat about that another day, but
No, totally.
but from an inventor standpoint, you know, if you've created a new product or a new offering, you know, I think that in my experience, and maybe this is interesting to the guys that are listening, is the ability to scale. And you know, I've had the opportunity to be the principal of Prodigal Holdings for a while now, which is a consulting group that looks to M&A spaces, primarily on the sell side, where we represent small organizations, primarily in the ag sector, but willingness to go outside of that as well to optimize the return on investment. So a group that says, hey, I'm ready to exit my business that I've really invested in. How do I maximize my retirement? Right?
Yeah.
How do I maximize my return? And we can go through operationally and make sure that you're as productive as you need to be. We can go through financially and make sure your books are clean. We can go through from a commercial standpoint, from, you know, what is your market? What are the markets you've explored? What are the additional opportunities you have? And what are the size of those opportunities to really, you know, blow out your return?
Yeah.
On the other hand, you know, maybe you've created a business that's more service oriented, that, you know, while you're not ready to sell out today, you know, there's probably an opportunity for you to create your own franchise, which I think is something that a lot of people don't think about.
No.
You know, but the you know, in Get or SOS, right?
Yeah.
Your business here, they focus on cleaning and restoration businesses.
Yep.
And that's one of the hottest franchises in the country.
Oh yeah.
And look, you know, there was MySpace and Facebook, and there's a lot of competing businesses out there. And just because there's already a good business in that space doesn't mean that you can't create a better mousetrap or a more desirable mousetrap. And if you're willing to kind of put another 5-10 years into your business before trying to, you know, create that cash out experience for you, you know, maybe franchising your business is the right way to go. And there's resources out there for you to pursue those. So those are always really fascinating. But I think that from a startup space specifically, going back to kind of your original question, I kind of rabbit holed on that. I apologize.
You're good.
Going back to some of those original questions about why is it so exciting, and I think the payoff is part of it. I know for me that's part of it, and not just the payoff from what it means for my bank account, but there's real pride in seeing something that was an infant become a rock star.
Yeah. It's the whole thing to me is just really, really cool. And man, yeah, I think you guys are set up to really blow up and take it to the next level.
Well, thanks. We're working on it.
And it's cool to be, have kind of an insider look to that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you kind of opening the door. I know there's certain lines you have to walk as a CCO that you have to be careful of, but I appreciate you kind of letting us look under the hood a little bit on what you guys are hoping to accomplish and what the future looks like. Yeah. So, Lon, I really appreciate everything you've talked about today. We've talked about some really, really cool things, both in your personal life.
Yeah. Little serpentine, I think.
Yeah. We went all over the place, but we talked about some awesome things that I hope and I know people are going to get some good value out of both in their personal lives, their professional lives, whether they own a small business or they work at a startup. I think any of that is going to be really, really good. So I want to finish up talking about the 3 questions that I ask everybody.
Yeah.
So first things first.
Yeah.
Any book? What's your favorite book or podcast that you're reading or listening to right now?
So this is probably going to sound pretentious, and I think we were just not talking about it. So I'm in the middle of rereading Milton Friedman again. So
okay.
Wealth of Nations.
Love it.
So that, and I also have my other Audible that I'm listening to right now is Churchill's America's Contribution to Democracy.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But I mean, you know me, like I'm a sucker for a space odyssey, if we want to get like real.
Dude, you have quite the wide breadth of books that you like.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Because you just mentioned Churchill and then you'll go home and read Harry Potter to your kids.
Totally.
So like, it's awesome.
Yeah.
You have just this whole wide breadth of things that you like to read.
Yeah, I do.
It's cool.
I think, I think on top of that, this is going to sound really geeky too, but I kind of got addicted to HBRs, Harvard Business Reviews, during my graduate work.
Love it.
And they're just fascinating.
Yeah.
So I love it. I love reading HBRs and just kind of understanding people's business practices and why they made decisions that they made. There's actually a really fascinating podcast, and I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but this one is actually available through Audible. Their Plus subscription, so it's kind of a free one. And it is Corporate Wars, where they talk about like Netflix versus Blockbuster.
I want to say, we had McKay Kessler on, and I think he mentioned something like that
it's
too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That from a podcast standpoint, I love it. Usually they're 5 to 10 episodes per like category. And you can usually find, a business that interests you in there. So
that's cool.
That's some pretty good candy.
I love it. I love it. Next question.
Yeah.
You work for you're the CCO of a startup company.
Yeah.
You have a wife and 3 kids.
Yeah.
You own a small business.
Yeah.
You've got all of these things that you do that I think lead to long days.
Yeah.
How do you relax or recharge at the end of a long day?
Yeah, I don't.
Do you ever sleep?
No, I just kind of run hot. Well, look, so my days usually end about 1:30 in the morning, 2 a.m. And then my first conference call, because my company's Irish-based, usually starts at about between 7 and 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
So it's usually when my day starts. So I don't do a lot of downtiming. I will, I'll crawl into bed late and, watch something Netflix really late just to kind of turn the brain off. Cause otherwise, you can't some Stranger Things or whatever.
Right.
Something dumb. But honestly, my relaxation actually comes at the start of the day. Again, my faith is extremely important to me. So I start my days, in the scriptures, doing kind of a devotional type of a deal for myself, and that is what sets my tempo for the rest of the day.
That's cool. You're the first person to talk about the beginning of the day, and I think it's a lot of things that people miss.
Well, you've had a lot of successful people on here, and then you've had me. So that's probably
maybe
what it
you're
is.
doing it wrong. No,
probably doing it wrong.
No. I think that's hugely important. I think again, we've talked about church a lot, which I don't want to alienate those that haven't.
Well, I don't think people are. There's no reason for people to be alienated.
No, but I want to hit at I also served a church mission.
Yeah.
And I noticed when I really got into my morning routine on my mission, I was the most successful and felt the most
energized.
Yeah, energized.
Goggins talks about it, right?
Yeah, I think how you start your day, which I don't start my day very well now, and I need to get better at it. But starting your day effectively, I think can help you have a more productive day, and I think it helps you relax too.
Yeah. It allows your mind to get organized.
Yeah.
Patton said, failing to plan is planning to fail.
Yeah.
Right? So
helps you do that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, last question.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of really awesome things, and you hit at some of the things in your youth that kind of helps you set up for your career. But I want to ask you if you could rewind to the beginning of your career, whether it's your professional career or maybe it's even something that happened to you as a kid. If you could rewind to the beginning of it all, what's one thing that you would tell yourself?
Get an engineering degree.
So then you can become a CEO quicker.
That's it.
No, there you go.
Look, I think I probably would have told myself, and I just recently gave this advice to my niece's husband, and that is start a business.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, and so I was never really afraid of it. But at the same time, my mom kind of drilled into me this stability, be financially stable. And then on top of it, I didn't know what resources I could draw on to start a business, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, when you're in college, man, everything's coming at you. And so you have new business ideas every week. And I always felt like I needed to find that home run business.
Yeah.
And because I never felt like I knew what that home run business was, I wasn't really willing to take the risk.
Right.
So I thought, well, if I get involved in a career where I'm getting a stable paycheck, then I can take the risk. And that's not really the way it works.
Yeah.
My advice would be start a business.
Yeah.
It does not matter if it's your home run business. It doesn't matter if it's your lifelong love and passion.
Yeah.
I think if you have passion for it, that's important. But it doesn't have to be like the thing that moves earth and stars for you, right?
Yeah.
So do the thing that you think can be productive and get your feet wet in the entrepreneurial world if that's your thing, right? Start a business and then sell it.
Yeah.
Get the capital and then go do the thing that moves your earth and stars, right? Then do the thing.
Then go hit the home run.
Exactly. Yeah. Because whether you're working for the man or whether you're working for yourself, at least then you're working towards that goal of being financially independent. And I think you would be much more successful, better served by starting that earlier, where risk is a lot easier. You don't have a mortgage. Maybe you have one kid, maybe you have no kids, maybe you're married, maybe you're not married, but your risk level is so much lower. When you're in college and you're like, man, I lost everything I have.
It's like $100.
Congratulations! It was a couch from Goodwill. You know what I mean? Like,
you're gonna be fine,
you'll
dude.
Be fine, you know. And now it's like, man, I got all these car payments and I got all this other stuff. So I think it's easier when you're young. So take the risk, do it, even if it's not your lifelong passion. Do it and then move up, just like you would working for the man.
So cool. Well, Lon, thank you. Seriously.
Thank you, Hayden.
Thanks for coming on the podcast. I think you've provided a lot of really good insights into your world professionally, into the ag space, but into just how, hopefully, to help people be better and be better personally. The concept of being 1% better every day is hard for me at times, but it's something that I'm really trying to buy into. And I hope that people can take something from this podcast, from the other podcast, whatever it might be, and can hopefully make themselves a little bit better, whether it's, again, with their small business, or maybe it's just a professional career choice, or personally, I hope it can help them be a better person. And
likewise.
Really appreciate you coming on, brother. Thanks for doing this.
Hayden.
And where can people find you? Where should reach out to you? LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
Feel free to reach out to me. If you send me a little bit of note with it, I'm probably more likely to accept. If you say, hey, I saw you on the podcast, this is who I am, we want to connect, that'd be great.
Awesome. Thanks, Lon. Appreciate it.
Cool. Appreciate you, Hayden.
We'll talk to you later.
All right, see you, buddy.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Subscribe on any major podcast platform or check out our website at successonpoint.com.